He did begin walking again, nothing like the marathons of '92, but he managed 2 miles a day if it wasn't raining. His usual route took him down the perversely named Up Mile Hill to the Derry Public Libraries and then on to Backpage, a used bookstore and newsstand on the corner of Witcham and Main. Backpage stood next to a jumbled junkatorium called Second-Hand Rose, Second-Hand Clothes, and as he passed this store one day during the August of his discontent, Ralph saw a new poster among the announcements of outdated bean suppers and ancient church socials. Placed so it covered roughly half of a yellowing Pat Buchanan for President placard. The woman in the 2 photographs at the top of the poster was a pretty blonde in her late 30s or early 40s, but the style of the photos, unsmelling full face on the left, unsmelling profile on the right, plain white background on both, was unsettling enough to stop Ralph in his tracks. The photos made the woman look as if she belonged in a post office wall or in a TV docudrama, and that the poster's printed matter made clear was no accident. The photos were what stopped him, but it was the woman's name that held him. Wanted for murder, Susan Edwina Day, was printed across the top in big black letters, and below the stimulated mug shots in red, "Stay out of our city." There was a small line of print at the very bottom of the poster. Ralph's close vision had deteriorated quite a bit since Carolyn's death. Gone to hell in a handbasket might have actually been a more accurate way of putting it, and he had to lean forward until his brow was pressed against the dirty show window of Second-Hand Rose, Second-Hand Clothes before he could decipher it. Paid for by the Maine Life Watch Committee. Far down in his mind, a voice whispered, Hey, Susan Day, how many kids did you kill today?" Susan Day, Ralph recalled, was a political activist from either New York or Washington, the sort of fast-speaking woman who regularly drove taxi drivers, barbers, and hard-headed construction workers into foaming frenzies. Why that particular little jangle of doggerel had come into his mind, however, he couldn't say. It was tacked to some memory that wouldn't quite come. Maybe his tired old brains were just cross-referencing that 60s Vietnam protest chant, the one which had gone, Hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? No, that's not it, he thought. Close, but no cigar. It was just before his mind could cough up a deep-nosed name and face. A voice spoke from almost beside him. Earth Ralph! Come in, Ralphie, baby! Roused out of his thoughts, Ralph turned toward the voice. He was both shocked and amused to find he had almost been asleep on his feet. Christ, he thought. You never know how important sleep is until you miss a little. Then all the floors started to tilt and all the corners on things started to round off. It was Hamilton Davenport, the proprietor of Backpage, who had spoken to him. He was stalking the library cart he kept in front of his shop with brightly jacketed paper bags. His old corncob pipe, to Ralph it always looked like the stack of a metal steamship, jutted from the corner of his mouth, sending little puffs of blue smoke into the hot, bright air. Winston Smith, his old gray tomcat, sat in the open doorway of the shop with his tail curled around his paws. He looked at Ralph with yellow-eyed indifference, as if to say, You think you know old, my friend? I'm here to testify you don't know dick about getting old. Sheesh, Ralph, Davenport said. I must have called your name at least 3 times. I guess it was wool gathering. Ralph said. He stepped past the library cart, leaned in the doorway. Winston Smith held his place with regal disinterest, and grabbed the 2 papers he bought every day, a Boston Globe and a USA Today. The Derry News came right to the house courtesy of Peach the paperboy. Ralph sometimes told people he was sure one of the 3 papers was comic relief, but he had never been able to make up his mind which one it was. He broke up as the deep-nosed face came into his mind. It was Ed. He'd heard that nasty little chant from last summer out by the airport, and it really wasn't any wonder it had taken him a while to retrieve the memory. Ed Deebner was the last person in the world from whom you'd expect to hear something like that. Ralphie? Ham said. You just shut down on me. Ralph blinked. Oh, sorry, I haven't been sleeping very well. That's what I started to say. Bummer. But there are worse problems. Just drink a glass of warm milk and listen to quiet music half an hour before bed. Ralph had begun to discover that this summer, everyone in America had apparently a pet remedy for insomnia, some bit of bedtime magic that had been handed down through the generations like the family Bible. Box Good, also Beethoven, and William Ackerman ain't bad. But the real trick, Davenport raised one finger impressively to emphasize this, is not to get up from your chair during that half hour. Not for anything. Don't answer the phone. Don't wind up the dog and put out the alarm clock. Don't decide to brush your teeth even. Nothing. Then, when you do go to bed, out like a light. What if you're sitting there in your favorite easy chair and all at once you realize I have a call of nature? Ralph asked. These things come on pretty suddenly when you get to be my age. Do it in your pants, Ham said promptly, and burst out laughing. Ralph smiled, but it had a dutiful feel. His insomnia was rapidly losing whatever marginal humor value it might once have had. In your pants! Ham chortled. He slapped the library cart and wagged his head back and forth. Ralph happened to glance down at the cat. Winston Smith looked blandly back at him, and to Ralph's calm yellow gaze seemed to say, Yes, that's right, he's a fool, but he's my fool. Not bad, huh? Hamilton Davenport, master of the snappy comeback. Dude, in your pants? Pants? He snorted laughter, shook his head, then took the $2 bills Ralph was holding out, then slipped them into the pocket of his short red apron and came out with some change. That about right? You bet. Thanks, Ham. Uh-huh. And all joking aside, try the music. It really works. Smells out your brainwaves or something. I will. And the devil of it was he probably would, as he already tried Mrs. Rappaport's lemon and hot water recipe, and John McClure's advice on him to clear his mind by slowing his respiration and concentrating on the word cool. Except when Shauna said it, the word came out cool. When you were trying to deal with the slow but relentless erosion of your good sleep time, any folk remedy started to look good. Ralph began to turn away and then turned back. What's with that poster next door? Ham wrinkled his nose. Dan's place? Dan Dalton's place? I don't look in there at all if I can help. It screws up my appetite. Has he got something new and disgusting in the window? I guess it's new. No, it's not as yellow as the rest of them, and there's a notable lack of flighter on it. Looks like a wanted poster, only it's Susan Dan in the photos. Susan Dan, son of a bitch! He cast a dark and humorless look at the shop next door. What is she, president of the National Organization of Women or something? Ex-president and co-founder of Sisters in Arms, author of My Mother's Shadow and Lilies of the Valley. That was a study of battered women and why so many of them refuse to blow the whistle on the men that batter them. She won a Pulitzer Prize for it. Susie is one of the 3 or 4 most politically influential women in America right now, and she can really write as well as think. That clown knows I've got one of her petitions sitting right by my cash register. What petitions? We're trying to get her up here to speak, Ham said. You know the Right to Life was tried to firebomb women care last Christmas, right? Ralph cast his mind cautiously back into the black pit he'd been living in at the end of '92 and said, Well, I remember that the cops caught some guy in the hospital's long-term parking lot with a can of gasoline, but I didn't know. That was Charlie Pickering. He's a member of Daily Bread, one of the Right to Life groups that keep the pickets marching out there, Ham said. They put him up to it, too, take my word. This year, they're not going to be bothering with gasoline, though. They're going to try to get the city council to change the zoning regulations to squeeze woman care right out of existence. They just might do it, too, you know, Derry. Ralph, it's not exactly a hotbed of liberalism. No, Ralph said with a wan smile. And it's never been that. Woman care is an abortion clinic, is it? Ham gave an out-of-patience look, and jerked his head in the direction of second-hand rows. That's what assholes like him call it, he said. Only they like to use the word mill instead of clinic. They ignore all the other stuff woman care does. To Ralph, Ham had begun to sound a little like the TV announcer who had hawked run-free pantyhose during the Sunday afternoon movie. They're involved in family counseling, they deal with spouse and child abuse, and they run a shelter for abused women over by the Newport Town. They have a rape crisis center in the in-town building by the hospital, and a 24-hour hotline for women who've been raped or beaten. In short, they stand for all the things that make Marlboro men like Dan shit bullets. But they do perform abortions, Ralph said. That's what the pickets are about, right? There had been sign-carrying demonstrators in front of the low-slung, unobtrusive brick building that housed woman care for years, it seemed to Ralph. They always looked too pale to him, too intense or too skinny or too fat, too utterly sure that God was on their side. The signs they carried said things like the unborn have rights too, and life what a beautiful choice, and that old standby, abortion is murder. On several occasions, women using the clinic, which was near Dairy House but not actually associated with it, Ralph thought had been spat upon. Yeah, they perform abortions, Ham said. You got a problem with that? Ralph thought of all the years he and Carolyn had tried to have a baby, years that had produced nothing but several false alarms and a single messy 5-month miscarriage, and shrugged. Suddenly the day seemed too hot and his legs too tired. The thought of his return journey, the up-mile hill leg of it in particular, hung in the back of his mind like something strung like from a line of fishhooks. Christ, I don't know, he said. I just wish people didn't have to get so shrill. Ham grunted, walked over to his neighbor's display window and peered at the bogus wanted poster. While he was looking at it, a tall, pallid man with a goatee, the absolute antithesis of the Marlboro Man, Ralph would have said, materialized from the doomy depths of second-hand rose, second-hand clothes, like a vaudeville spook that has gotten a bit moldy around the edges. He saw that Ham was looking at, and a disdainful smile dimpled the corner of his mouth. Ralph thought it was the kind of smile that could cost a man a couple of teeth or a broken nose, especially on a hot day like this one. Ham pointed to the poster and shook his head violently. Dan's smile deepened. He flapped his head at Davenport. Who gives a shit what you think? The gesture said, and then disappeared back into the depths of his store. Davenport returned to Ralph, bright spots of color burning in his cheeks. That man's picture should be next to the word prick in the dictionary, he said. Exactly what he thinks about you, I imagine, Ralph thought. But of course did not say. That Ham stood in front of the library cart full of paper bags, hands stuffed into his pockets beneath his red change apron, brooding at the poster of Hey, Susan Day. Well, Ralph said, I suppose I better... Ham shook himself out of his brown study. Don't go yet, he said. Sign my petition first while you put a little shine back on my morning. Ralph shifted his feet uncomfortably. I usually don't get involved in confrontational stuff like... Come on, Ralph, Ham said in a let's be reasonable voice. We're not talking confrontation here. We're talking about making sure that the fruits and nuts like the ones who run Daily Blood and political Neanderthals like Dan don't shut down a really useful women's resource center. It's not like I'm asking you to endorse testing chemical warfare weapons on dolphins. No, Ralph said. I suppose not. We're hoping to spend 5,000 signatures to Susan Day by the 1st of September. Probably won't do any good. Derry's really not much more than a wide place in the road, and she's probably booked into the next century anyhow. But it can't hurt to try. Ralph thought about telling Ham that the only petition he wanted to sign was one asking the gods of sleep to give him back the 3 hours or so of good rest that night they had stolen away, but then he took another look at the man's face and decided against it. Carolyn would have signed his damn petition, he thought. She was no fan of abortion, but she was also no fan of men coming home after the bars closed and mistaking their wives and kids for soccer balls. True enough, but that wouldn't have been her main reason for signing. She would have done it on the off chance that she might get to hear an authentic firebrand like Susan Day up close and in person. She would have done it out of the ingrained curiosity which had perhaps been her dominating characteristic. Something so strong and not even the brain tumor had been able to kill it. 2 days before she died, she had pulled the movie ticket he'd been using as a bookmark out of the paperback novel he'd left on her bedside table because she wanted to know what he'd been to see. It had been A Few Good Men, as a matter of fact, and he was both surprised and dismayed to discover how much it hurt to remember that. Even now it hurt like hell. Sure, he told Ham. I'll be happy to sign it. My man! Ham exclaimed and clapped him on the shoulder. The broody look was replaced by a grin. But Ralph didn't think the change much of an improvement. The grin was hard and unespecially charming. Step into my den of iniquity. Ralph followed him into the tobacco-smelling shop, which did not seem particularly iniquitous at 9:30 in the morning. Winston fled before them, pausing just once to look back with his ancient yellow eyes. He's a fool and you're another, that parting stare might have said. Under the circumstances, it wasn't a conclusion Ralph felt much inclined to dispute. He tucked the newspapers under his arm, leaned over the rolled sheet on the counter beside the cash register, and signed a petition asking Susan Day to come to Derry and speak in defense of woman care.